Touch the Options button of any cue list to open the Options window. The Mode area on the left allows you to change the cue list type. Touch a button to select the type. Cue list types are covered in detail in additional videos. General Options allows you to set global show options. Unblock allows you to do a global or conditional unblock of the cue list. To unblock an entire cue list, touch Unblock and press Enter. Unblocking is covered in greater detail in an additional video. Priority allows you to set the priority value of a cue list. Higher priority cue lists will take precedence over lower priority cue lists. Use the plus and minus buttons to change the level, or enter it directly in the box using the keypad. Priorities are covered in greater detail in an additional video. By default, tracking and retrack all parameters are turned on for all newly created cue lists. Tracking means the cue list maintains the state of any values recorded in previous queues as you advance queues. So if you've recorded a color of red in Q1 and you advance to Q2, the cue list will continue to output the red value without it being recorded into Q2. With tracking off, the cue list only outputs values recorded into the currently active queue. Retrack all parameters tells the cue list to reassert any tracked values whenever you advance a queue. This example assumes two cue lists set at the same priority. You record fixtures 31 through 35 to red in queue list 1, Q1, and they have no recorded color value in Q2, and then green in Q3. Record them to blue in queue list 2, Q1. Trigger queue list 1, Q1, and they change to red. Trigger list 2, Q1, and they change to blue. Queue list 2 is now controlling the color value. With retrack on, when you advance to list 1, Q2, list 1 would reassert the tracked values and take control, changing them back to red. With retrack off, list 1 would not take control again until the values were actively recorded into a triggered queue. So advancing to Q2 on list 1 would not take control, but advancing to Q3 with a recorded color value of green would. Track last to first essentially makes the queue list a loop for tracking values, and going from the last queue to the first queue would track the same as from Q1 to 2. Marking must be turned on in order to be active for a queue list. Touching the button cycles through marking per queue list, marking per queue, and marking off. Marking is also sometimes called move in black. With marking per queue list on, anytime a fixture's intensity value drops to 0, the console will look ahead and preset its value for the next queue that has an intensity value above 0. With mark per queue, the user can choose individual queues to be marked in the queue list window. Select the queue you want to mark and touch the toggle mark button to turn it on and off. The fade and delay of marking can be set in the menu. Press Menu, touch Show, Queue Settings, and the Mark tab. Adjust your defaults and touch Apply to complete the command. Release allows you to set the release time for each queue list. Use the plus and minus to change the time, or touch the box and enter the time on the keypad. Press Enter to complete the command. By default, all parameters release at the same time. Turning Fade Out First on will cause the queue list to release intensity first, then release all other parameters when intensity reaches 0. Block Global Release tells the queue list to ignore the Snap Release and Release Snap commands. With Reset to First Queue off, if you release a queue list while in Q3, then the next time it's triggered, it will go to Q3. Turn Reset to First Queue on to have the queue list always start at the first queue. By default, any queue list that has all its values overridden will release. Turn on Stay Alive to force it to remain active when overridden. With Release on Next Go on, the queue list will release the next time any queue is executed on any queue list of any type. Startup Settings allows you to set a queue list to be triggered when the console starts, as well as set the level of the fader. Turn off Use Defaults to set the fader level by touching the box and entering it in the keypad, or touching Get Current to use the current fader level. Press Set to complete the command. Turn Active On to have the queue list active on startup.